Alrighty. So today's video is going to be a follow-on from yesterday's video about shadow work, because I got a few questions or comments asking me to share a little bit more about resources and techniques and just a little bit more about the shadow work. So the funny thing is I just recorded like a 20-minute video, which felt like really clear and good video. And then my camera wasn't recording. So I am going to see what comes up the second time I talk about this. It'll probably be slightly different. But yeah, this has happened to me too many times. Anyways, let's see. So the key thing with the shadow work is it is simpler than your mind wants to make it out to be. So the shadow work comes to you. You will know that it's time to do the shadow work if maybe you've had some big realizations, you realize you're not separate from life, but you're feeling heavy, you're feeling stuck, you're feeling like you just have to be so honest with yourself, right? This is what it was for me. It was like, okay, I've realized all of this. I'm not struggling with chronic illness anymore. I'm not, I didn't believe that story anymore. There was a strong realization that everything was playing out as it needs to. Life, you are life. There is no separation. But being honest with myself, did it feel like that in moment-to-moment reality, right? In going out and having a conversation with a person, I could feel as the resistance patterns started to come up again, judgment started to arise again, feelings of resistance. But there's an awareness that is there wasn't before. That's the cool thing is, right? You can see it. It's not you, but you can still get caught up in it a little bit. So you have to be honest with yourself, right? This is where some people go off track, is where they'll just be talking about the insights that they've had, but they can't actually live it because there's still trauma work in the body. There's still emotion work. So that's the other thing with the shadow work, is it's the same thing as trauma work, as emotional work, as healing work, right? Different people will talk about it differently, but that's what I'm talking about. So what I'll share now are the inquiries that I found the most helpful for dealing with the shadow work. And again, the key thing here is that if it's, you don't have to go looking for the shadow work. You don't have to go looking for the emotions. It will come up, right? What happens so often is we will be looking for a certain experience. Like we'll be like, oh, I want to feel deep sadness. I want to feel deep grief. Or deep shame, right? You might hear people talking about these root core emotions, and you might be wondering, how do you get to that? You have to work through what's coming up in your experience now, because generally there's layers of other stuff that we first have to feel through. And what the mind does is it always will redirect attention away from the shadow work, basically. So I see this happening so often when I'm working with somebody, or I get this question a lot, whether it's in comments or whatnot. And it's like when frustration or confusion, like these are often, or irritability, like these ones are often on the surface level, on the outer layer of the shadow, one way to talk about it. Then we're looking for the deeper stuff. But you have to see what's happening there is the mind is trying to redirect attention for something else other than what is happening in the moment right now, right? So you'll be like, when am I going to feel the shame? When am I going to feel the guilt? Why can't I feel the emotions? I can't feel the emotions. I can't do this work, right? These are all the things that identity and the mind will be saying. It's all about the reasons that you can't do this, right? But that's how the mind works. So you have to become clear on that in yourself, is you have to see, and this is for me why meditation has been so helpful for me throughout the path. This is a little bit of an aside, but some people don't need meditation as much. It's very interesting I'm talking with a lot more people about their paths and people that are in deep stages of awakening and realization. And it's very interesting how everybody got there. For some people, it's very different path. It's not very much a meditation path. It's more around maybe energetic work, chakra work. But here's the thing is, like, people will talk about meditation differently and will have different beliefs around what meditation is. But I think some form of removing distraction and coming into being with what is arising in your experience right now, I think that's somewhere on the path. I think everybody does some form of that. I can't say for sure, but what I think often happens is semantics happen around, well, no, I didn't do meditation. But if you speak with somebody a little bit more, maybe they said, oh yeah, but I did a lot of sitting and feeling into what's here. Whereas for me, that is what I call meditation nowadays. It's just the space of, coming into what is in my experience if I stop putting my attention outwards. And for me, what's key is that it's not a space of trying to force an experience, right? Because again, meditation is such a broad term nowadays. There's so many different ways that people do it. But the stuff that I'm talking about, the real deep stuff, is generally around not trying to kind of, again, you want to see what is here that I'm trying to get away from. That's the shadow work. So the inquiry that I find most helpful was realizing that why am I, if I was busy in daily life, why am I starting to feel annoyed? Why am I starting to feel resistant towards the way somebody is behaving? Why am I starting to project with should? Should is such a key word, right? Because when your mind is saying they shouldn't be doing that, the world shouldn't be this way, he shouldn't have done what he did, she shouldn't have said that, if they hadn't done that, then I would be happy. All of this, imagining reality differently as it is playing out, means that there is something in your experience that you do not want to feel. And it is the feeling that is being triggered by that person doing what they're doing, or the world playing out the way it is playing out. Then the separate identity, which doesn't exist in the way that it thinks it does, will, to keep itself into existence, will imagine that things could have played out differently. So it will imagine that if this hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have to feel what I'm feeling now. That's what's key. So that's when you do the shadow work, right? Then you go and sit. This is the approach that I like to share. Then you go and sit and you explore, why do I believe that shouldn't have happened? And you're not looking for intellectual answers. I don't know, different people can do this differently, but the approach that I'm sharing here is much simpler, right? It's more coming into what does this make me feel that I do not want to allow myself to feel? Because again, that's why the mind will redivert attention into an imagined scenario where this didn't play out, because things playing out the way they did makes me feel helpless. Maybe it makes me realize that I can't control other people to do things the way that I believe that they should be done. And then maybe a belief arises as well, a belief that, wow, I believe that I need to control other people. Again, these kind of approaches become very intuitive, right? So it can sound complicated when I'm talking about this, but you find your intuitive way just into exploring what don't you want to feel. That's what it comes down to, right? You go and sit and you watch how the mind is running, right? Often, again, attention goes very much up into the mind to avoid feeling what's truly happening in the body. So this is another aspect of shadow work, is eventually it becomes so simple that it's just about exploring the sensations, right? And there can be narratives happening. And for me, sometimes the way I would do it is I will sit. And what's also important is there's no correct technique, right? So for me, it fluctuated a lot depending on what was arising. So I would sit and then I would notice, wow, attention's very much in the mind right now. Like I'm sitting I'm going to sit for half an hour. And for the first 5 minutes, I just see how I keep on getting pulled into a thought. Okay, that's what's happening. But eventually, and this for me came after having done a lot of work around this, and it just takes consistency, right? It takes a willingness to keep on exploring these parts of yourself. Then it was like, oh, wait, I'm doing that to avoid what's happening in the body. Like, why am I staying so much in the narratives or imagining past and future? Because, look how uncomfortable it is to pull attention down into the chest, into the, lower abdomen, those kind of areas. It's like, wow, that's uncomfortable for the mind because it wants to stay away from the shadow sensations even. And the sensations are fine, but you have to let them overtake you almost and see all the things the mind says about it. Like, this is too much. This is overwhelming. I'm going to get stuck in fear forever. That's all narrative to pull you out of the sensations. Another aspect of the shadow work that I found really helpful as well is always using love, always using gentleness, always using compassion. Because again, you're often dealing with some stuff that can be quite intense, and it's okay, you can't handle this. It might do weird things to your nervous system for a while. There can be all of these things playing out. It's a very messy process. But yeah, using unconditional love. This is the stuff that I'm always trying to share. So yeah, if your mind is asking like, what is the right technique for shadow work? There is no right technique. It's everything that I'm trying to share on this channel generally. Like if you listen to my guided meditations, this is kind of what I'm pointing you into, is an allowance, an opening up to what's here if I'm not trying to manage my situation, if I'm not trying to force my situation. So that's the approach that I recommend. But also, like I was mentioning earlier, it's beautiful how different people come to the same place through, like, on the surface, it appears like different techniques, right? And it's funny, people might even get very attached to the technique that they used. So I see now that I talk with a lot of different people, for some people, it's like somatic experiencing, it's some killer bee inquiries. And I think they're all great techniques, but you can be doing the same thing just very intuitively without a name for it. You're not following some specific kind of, oh, I'm using this technique. I'm really not trying to shit on anybody's techniques. I think whatever technique that you find, whether it comes from a more kind of analytical approach of like you read a book and somebody told you this is how to do the trauma work and the emotion work, that's awesome if it works. For somebody else, this is how it was more for me. I'd listen to Angelo's content. He would explain how to kind of go into the body or just kind of disidentify from your mind. And then it becomes quite clear that you need to go into the body. And it's like the same as somatic experiencing and all of these things. And for me, it just became intuitive to use love and compassion. So like I just kind of put together my own approach, and you might come from a different space. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. The one thing I would say I don't quite like is when people try to force their approach onto somebody else, right? So that's coming from ego. That's coming from, it can seem like it's coming from a good intention, and the intention might be good, but this is the problem with the mind, is we don't realize what's called for in the moment, right? We'll just project what our mind is saying outwardly. So the mind might be saying, ooh, you need to do this technique that I did because it worked for me, and this is the way that you do the shadow work. And it's like, no, that's just like, that's how you worked. And if the moment feels like it when another person, like you can suggest this to people, but I do just see this sometime in these awakening spaces, people become, again, it's identity being sneaky. And then you have to be so aware, and this comes with time. It's not complicated, but you just become more and more and more aware of when am I, projecting something. And it starts to happen naturally and intuitively, and you just see it as you engage more in life. But yeah, I just do see this sometimes where people are like, this is the way that you do the work. You have to read this book. You have to do this approach. And it's like, cool, it's an invitation. If somebody's looking for an approach that they don't have, maybe that is helpful for somebody. But just realize that everybody is going to kind of take what they hear from somebody and then find their intuitive approach. Even the stuff that I'm sharing, I want you to feel into what am I saying that resonates, and then put that into your array of whatever it is you're doing, right? And if you have no clue, then it's cool. Then go and read something that comes up. But at the same time, you don't need it. It's not intellectual. It's not complicated. It's about honesty and seeing what you're trying to get away from in your experience now. Okay. Last thing I wanted to say, I kind of touched on this in the last video as well, but I remember I recorded it now in the recording that didn't come out, was talking a bit about how also life is such an important part of the shadow work, because maybe you can get quite comfortable in doing the work alone on your mat in an isolated, safe environment, but you don't realize how much stuff there might still be that just comes out when you engage more, when you are in dynamic situations around people that, again, you can't control. Then you might see all this stuff around control. So situations that feel triggering are very good because it pulls up the material that is showing you how is your mind still creating suffering by trying to go against the flow of things. So you always just have to be honest with yourself. It's like, what am I afraid of? What am I not allowing myself to do? Like, why am I hesitating? Why am I not in flow with life? Because I'm still trying to control my environment too much. So sometimes you just have to throw yourself into things that, you maybe want to do, but you're afraid to do, and see what comes up. And maybe you mess up, maybe you fail, maybe you make a fool of yourself. But that is so powerful in the long run, right? Then you get to feel humiliation, then you get to feel embarrassment. Again, just be authentic, be yourself, but see where are you holding yourself back from being yourself. So that's the other side of it, right? That allowing yourself to engage, don't hold back. And then, right, also don't get addicted to, I always have to be, like you just start to come into a flow with integration and disintegration, right? There's times when life will be wanting you to integrate. And if you're too much in the mind, you might be fighting that and be trying to hold back from life. Or the other way around, life might be asking you to go within and giving you space to disintegrate through something like a health challenge that is forcing you to be on your own. Then don't fight that either. Just, you start to get into flow and trust life. But then you also have to see, like, when am I kind of now trying to stay in this space forever? Things are always new. The ground is continuously shifting. So yeah, and you're not going to get it perfectly right. Just try your best, right? Just realize you're trying your best, and that's the way you learn, right? This is the way that I can kind of have done all of this work, is through having made all of the mistakes of, like, oh shit, I was like fighting against life there. Oh shit, I was fighting against life there. That was the only way I saw it all. It's like, why are things difficult again? Why am I struggling again? Because I know these things, but why am I struggling? And then that's when you see, oh, okay. So it becomes very intuitive, and it's just about coming back into, what's here. And inquiries that, for me, sometimes, putting some fuel into your inquiry can be quite powerful. Like, can I really drive myself into the most, like, while I'm sitting, uncomfortable space, and feel into that and notice how the mind wants to pull out, and then stay with that. And then maybe you shift into just an allowance, like a natural kind of releasing all contraction. And then, so it's very intuitive, right? You find what works for you. So yeah, that's the second version of this video, seeing as I recorded one for my walls as my camera wasn't recording. So now my walls hopefully will know how to be liberated, but I don't think they have an ego, so they should be fine. And yeah, I hope this is helpful. Good luck.